Prelude. The end was near, but he did not fear it. His heart was full, his time on the earth complete. He had been granted a life of epic proportion, lived to its fullest measure. Now, death waited for him in the wings like a patient usher. The symphony of his years dwindled to an ellipsis of quiet strains. Old bones, old breath, impediment its own consciousness. Then, finally, the end, 103 years old. A man who had seen much. His last day was simple in the small town of Spotted Horse, Idaho, 1948. As he did every night at 6, he shuffled into the Maple Leaf Cafe, bent as a gnarled walking stick, and sat at the chrome-rimmed counter. A cheese sandwich on white bread and a glass of milk waited for him on the red faux marble formica. He grasped the sandwich with spidery fingers and clamped toothless gums over the bread, stamping out half-moons, leaving a rind of crust on the plate. Cold milk left an unacknowledged rim around his sinkhole lips. Hunched on the stool in an arthritic stupor, he peered up. A large black and white photograph enshrined in an ornate, gilded frame and coated with decades of dust hung on the grease-pocked wall. The picture showed an Indian marriage on a mountain cliff. The old man stared at the photograph as he chewed. Through fogged cataracts and cigarette smoke, the thinnest of echoes sliced through time, tickling his brain like an ancient feather. It plunged down a fissure in his memory where whole worlds had fallen. Beside the picture hung the mounted head of a rare white buffalo, musty gray like old carpet and moth-eaten in its truncated majesty. Its marble eyes, dulled by grease, cast a ghostly, ghastly gaze, as if its spirit had traversed beyond its tortured post nailed on the wall, and back to the open prairie, leaving only a husk. The old man wiped his mouth with a paper napkin, scratched at his crystallized stubble, then shuffled out. His old John Deere tractor was parked in front of the cafe, in a space tacitly reserved for him. He climbed onto the torn tractor seat and turned the key. The engine block rumbled, belched diesel soot, and shook tiredly into motion. Under the axle between the large tractor tires, a three-legged terrier, rheumatic and nearly blind, rose for the trip home. A long time ago, he'd named the dog Willie, but he no longer addressed him. Theirs was a silent bond expressed in daily rituals. Old man, old dog, old tractor, a fixture on the streets of the small town, passing, then gone, but always there. His dilapidated cabin sat several miles outside of town on a gravel road in the mountains, surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusted carcasses of broken machinery. He climbed from his tractor and shuffled past a small cemetery, oddly well kept, at the edge of the tangled yard. Two small boulders squatted like stalwart toads between two elegant gravestones. The engraved granite faces marked time, dragging it forward beyond living memory, beyond forgetting. The old man touched one of the gravestones in passing. He opened a tattered screen door, and the little dog followed, scurrying as the door slammed hollow behind them. Inside hung a somber gray pall. Stacks of newspapers and books teetered precipitously, sustained only by virtue of their chaos. The narrow path through the catacomb violated by an occasional stray book or crumpled paper. Beyond the eccentric squalor, black and white vintage photographs spanning a half-century, and a life rich in adventure blanketed the walls. Some framed, some thumbtacked to the broken plaster, their corners brittle and curling with time. Fragile remnants of vanished dreams. There were portraits of famous people: Wild Bill Hickok, Sitting Bull, George Armstrong Custer sitting on a dead grizzly. There are photographs of great events: the Pony Express, the San Francisco Fire, the first transcontinental railroad. And there were pictures of majestic scenery. One frame enshrined a 1938 Life magazine cover with a mountain scene. The cover blurb read, "A frontier photographer remembers America's West." One photograph, larger than all the others, hung above the stone fireplace. A beautiful woman with blonde hair like a lion's mane, tousled by the wind, her face cast toward the sun, sweeping her hair to the side with a tanned arm. Her other hand grasped a Winchester rifle. She wore men's dungarees and a white cotton blouse rolled to the forearms. A leather belt cinched her waist, the end drooping like a hound dog's tongue. It was not her beauty that was so striking, but rather the look in her eyes, mightily independent and piercing in its intensity. For all her youth, she was clearly a woman who had not suffered fools. Somewhere under the pallets of debris lay a negative plate. Only the negative, for the photograph itself had been thrown frantically in the fireplace long ago. In it, the Bitterroot Mountains towered beyond a meadow blanketed with flowers. The image had been blurred, however, for the photographer had knocked the camera in haste, and smears of tall buffalo grass seemed like undulating hair or waves of fire. Two images emerged from the whorls of grass, double exposed in ghostly mime. One was the ominous darkness of a grizzly bear running, its massive form besmudged by its speed, though its long, extended claws remained eerily in focus, leaving trails of lethal force like scratches across the page. At the far corner of the frame, in front of the grizzly, was the head of a little girl, barely higher than the grass. The photographic plate remained buried, but forever present, beneath the crushing sediment of a life's work. A squarish rocking chair sat before the fireplace. On its arm was a black, lacquered Chinese box, painted with the image of an Oriental slave girl, surrounded by admiring men, its edges burnished by wear. Had a visitor ever set foot in the cabin, that visitor would have been struck by the extraordinary mesalliance of such remarkable photographs within the rumpled cottage. The photographs were his legacy. Occasionally, unexpected thoughts from another time bumped around in his gnarled brain. He did not know why they came to him. Even in his quickening years, he fell into them like trapdoors to paradise, and they surrounded him in the vivid exuberance of his youth, and he remembered.